Okay, so this is group number 3, Luke Dietrich, and my group members were Trisha, Kelly, Joshua, and Danielle. And I guess one dropped out because I only had 5. So I want to apologize that I just found out about that last night, so I had to scramble to do 7 and 8. So bear with me on those. But I just wanted to thank everyone for getting their part of this done in a timely fashion, and I will begin. So I looked at this much different way than Michael's group. I'm going to go issue by issue. And my computer crashed and I had to borrow a Mac, and I don't know how to copy pictures with a Mac into PowerPoint, so I have no pictures. So I'm just assuming you guys all know what the issues look like. So each person in my group did 2 of these issues. Danielle did 1 and 2. So I'm going to try to summarize this because I've got like 20 pages here and not enough time. So the problem. So issue number 1, hopefully everybody can kind of picture that. There's a smelter and the associated pollution with it. It was releasing toxic gases into the surrounding local environment. Impacting the water, and what about the children? You know, like that's a big concern. You know, do we want children growing up in this toxic environment? So the closure goals: educate the public about the health issues, removal of the smelter so no more, pollution can occur. Land reclamation back to vegetation. And she went into some greater detail with this, so I'll just read a little of this off. Let's see. Begin land reclamation after demolition. Allow locals to be heavily involved in the reclamation process, as they will likely be the ones who will see it through. The process includes native tree plantings and plantings of acid-tolerant grasses. Lime and fertilizer will also aid in restoring the natural growth. So, like I said, she just went into a little more detail about all these, but I don't think I have time, so I'm just going to try to stay with the summarized version. So the decision-making influences on this would be funding, of course. Removal of a smelter, I'm sure would be really expensive. And then education in a third world country, that's always going to be kind of a challenge. So the priorities were, reducing the impacts to human health in the area, making sure, whatever improvements were made were economically feasible, and involving the locals every step of the way, because if they care about it, it'll probably be accomplished. So technologies: we've got hydroseeding, drilling, cyclone seeding, hand seeding, hand plugging, and transplanting. So basically all different forms of revegetation. So when evaluating these alternatives, so avoid applying these efforts in the dry season will aid in keeping the costs down and actually, improve the chances of them being successful. Hand seeding can lead to poor seed distribution, but it is the cheapest and easily implemented by the locals, who have limited experience with this. Hydroseeding is ideal for erosion control and relatively affordable and easily implemented. Cyclone seeding is an easy to implement and cheap alternative, but not as effective as some of the other alternatives. So seed drilling requires special equipment, thus will cost more, but is the most effective solution in areas with little slope. And then, hand planting and transplanting, increased labor, increased costs. So the preferred alternatives, I guess we didn't really follow this too well. We probably have a combination of alternatives in every one of our issues, because that was really the best way to go about a lot of these issues, is like a tandem approach, if you will. So we suggest these 3 forms of revegetation around the area. So then photo issue number 2. Poor containment of hazardous materials. So closure goals would be an assessment of, how toxic are these materials? And quick implementation to, mitigate the harmful effects. So decision-making influences, these are going to be the major three probably in most of these situations: money, safety, and time. Priorities: safety and insight, restoration. So I'm going to see if she elaborated on the restoration. No, not really. So technologies: polyura, polyethylene, tilling. So now we're going to evaluate these a little bit. Polyethera is a cheap alternative and an optimal resource for preventing the leaching of hazardous materials, but it is also easily implemented. However, only the effective in areas with hazardous materials which have not already leached into the soils. So basically we're talking about containment here for all of our alternatives. Polyethylene containment pallets can only hold materials for a short time before they are prone to breaking down, so materials will need to be transported quickly after containment. So that's going to, of course, increase the cost. Tilling is effective and cheap, but too much rain can cause soil saturation, which will slow the process of aeration and thus slow the removal of the hydrocarbons in the soil. So the preferred alternative, of course, a combination of technologies. So I would just say polyura can be used to contain the hazardous material. Polyethylene can be used to utilize the most hazardous waste. And the soil, should just be treated in the entire area because, that's going to be important for the future. So then issues 3 and 4, answered by Joshua. So imagine photo issue 3 in your mind. Tailings for miles. Lack of containment. So closure goals, of course. Containment of these tailings, and education as to why that's a bad thing. Like, don't just scatter your garbage around. Time and money and manpower. So those are kind of two of the trinity, but manpower, maybe educated manpower. I feel like they'd have plenty of manpower depending on what the situation is, but maybe he was speaking on people who have like a background in maybe restoration. That might be an issue in a third world country such as this. Priorities. Let's remove those tailings, and he mentioned there is some piping on the ground as well. So I guess remove the piping as well is what he was suggesting here. Technologies. Let's have a containment area. So containment is basically, we're talking about the same two materials that I talked about in the last issue, the polyura and the polyethylene pellets. Depending on, I guess, how toxic it is and the volume is, how you determine which one you would use. So photo issue 3, that's the one with the corn sticking out. I do remember that. Or 4, one with the corn. So crops grown in contaminated soils. That can't be good. That's, the soil and then plants, it's kind of the bottom of the food chain, and it'll kind of run through everything, Animals eat that, people eat it. He suggested move the crops, which might be difficult, given that the crops are probably there for a reason to begin with. And then treat the water, that's a big thing. Let's try to not add any more bad stuff into the soil. Influences would be the local culture of agriculture, of how they farm and just the traditions of how they go about that. So priorities are clean water to crops. That's pretty self-explanatory. Rainwater containment would be a good way to go about this, without having to treat a bunch of water. And then tilling for soil aeration to get rid of those hydrocarbons again. I guess they don't like air. So multiple collection points would help collect the rainwater, and then tilling the soils, of course. So we're going to evaluate these a little bit. Actually, that was pretty much what he had there. And then the preferred alternatives, of course, a combination of both. So photo issues 5 and 6 were answered by Tricia. So that was the one with the big open pit. So soil erosion, lack of environmental policies in the region, toxicity, and sedimentation. You know, it's got a full plate there. Erosion control, watershed management. You know, those would be two of the main issues there, and I can elaborate a little bit on that. Control of sheet and gully erosion, mass wasting, control accelerated erosion on mining and adjacent land, soil conservation, manage storm water runoff, control dust, reduce the chance of landslides, watershed management, prevent overclearing or having soil exposed for a prolonged amount of time, limiting length of time soil stockpiles. So influences here, funding, laws, education. Natural erosion control, using a variety of methods, which I will lay out in the next slide here. Hydroseeding, erosion control blankets. So basically revegetation's one way to go about this. The other way would be installing erosion control barriers. And also land shaping techniques to retain erosive surface runoff by using sediment basins. So bare ground seeding, of course, you know, it's harder for stuff to erode if there's roots holding it in place. Erosion control blankets. Mix of practices, big surprise. So issue 6, mining processing system was not operational. Many issues. So problems, copper mining processing system does not work, toxic tailing line burst, leaking toxic chemicals, very close proximity to schoolyard, posing serious toxicological concerns, potential groundwater pollution, increased risk of serious illness to sensitive populations, massive surface water containment, suspended particulate matter, sulfur oxide and arsenic particles emitted. So yeah, just a bunch of issues with this one. Protect the public health, of course, should be, you know, main goal, and reducing these risks. So there's conflicts of interest in this one. She hints here that mines may be privatized. So conflict of interest among government officials and investors might be an issue. And then a lack of environmental liability and enforceability in a country such as this. You know, I don't think they have an EPA or anything like we do here. So priorities, upgrade the infrastructure. You know, if you're not going to get rid of it, at least make it work. Retrofit the equipment, same thing. And accountability, you know, hold those who own this mine responsible for polluting the surrounding environment. So regular inspections, you know, maybe on like a national level would help solve this issue, because, you know, you could locate and identify infrastructure and other things that should be fixed in a timely manner. So she was saying maybe contact the World Health Organization on this for some funding and compliance inspections, like I said before. And the preferred alternative on this one is required inspections. We think that'll cut way down on this type of thing in the future and hopefully mitigate what's going on right now. So I apologize for these already, 7 and 8 here. So I identified this problem, number 7, as tailings, looked like a dry riverbed, sedimentation, and water pollution. You know, you got the whole gamut there. So I decided that containment, of course, first of all, then slow down this water to stop, you know, all these gullies from forming, and then erosion control. So the fishing-making influences, I'm not particularly sure what chemicals might be in these tailings, so I guess the first thing to do would be to identify those. It's a very large area, so cost is going to be a factor on this one. So actually I think I remember this one now. There's a big pipe there kind of going across. So I was thinking remove this pipe, you know, because I'm sure it's leaking into the stream that was right underneath it. Then try to treat that water, you know, heavy metal filtration. Then control the erosion on the banks. And then finally contain and remove the tailings, you know. Maybe that should be kind of moved up too, right behind that. You know, because if you treat the water before those are removed, you're just going to get recontamination. So technology is a wrecking ball. Let's get rid of that pipe. Water turnouts, you know, to slow down the water. Sediment fences around the watershed. All of this, of course, is going to have to be done in strategic areas because it's just a really large area. Contour wattles installed, hydroseeding, tree spade to transplant larger trees. So yeah, I just talked about all those. A combination of all the above. Photo issue 8. Okay, that was the one with the leaking pipe. I'm sorry. There must have been a pipe in the other one as well. But this was the one with the leaking pipe directly over a small stream. Of course, pollution, and then it looked like the sides of the stream were bare. So remove the pipe, water filtration, revegetation. It's going to be very similar to this last one. So cost, culture, time, you know, those are big things in all of these issues. Removal of that pipe, treat the water, revegetation. Pretty self-explanatory there. Demolition, filtration, hydroseeding, tree spade. So pretty much demolition of the pipe if you can only afford one of these things. You know, at least stop, you know, the pollution, and then you can start to control it once it's actually stopped. So finally, photo issue 9, answered by Kelly Henson. Negative impacts to the vegetative community, social and economic issues. And I'll try to elaborate real quick on that. The mine has highly impacted the surrounding plant community. Very high levels of heavy metals found in the native plants affect all of the biota around the mine. So she basically says this will be a very long-term project. It may take decades for heavy metals in the soil to come down to safe levels. An overall cleanup of the site will start the process. And she suggested a management plan should be implemented to oversee such a long-term project. So funding, manpower, time. Better control of water runoff. So she says the issue itself will not be, I'm sorry. Never mind, let me just go on here. So mechanical tilling and aeration, you know, to improve the soil, and then water treatment. So those same things here, let me see. She says tilling may not be the most effective way to treat the soil, but using mechanical technologies instead of chemicals would be better for the environment overall. There are a few things you can do for such high levels of metals in soils and plants. Drainage and filtration will be just the beginning of what is needed for proper water runoff control. This will be the most expensive part and the labor involved. And her preferred alternative was a combination of all these practices, and that's all I have.